I don't know when exactly it started. This feeling that something wasn't right. It was like a song playing faintly in the background, just a murmur at first, but growing louder with time. The first thing I noticed was how my wife, Emily, had changed on weekends. For the past 10 years, our marriage had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We loved each other, sure, but we weren't the kind of couple that clung to every moment. Mornings were slow and peaceful. She'd wake up later than me, shuffle to the kitchen in her oversized sweater, barely grunting a morning before pouring her coffee. But recently, that changed. Now she was up before me, already cooking breakfast. Eggs, bacon, even pancakes. She'd smile too much, ask too many questions. Did you sleep well? Do you need anything ironed? I was thinking we could do something together today. Maybe a hike? At first, I welcomed it. Maybe she was trying to rekindle something in our marriage. But by the third weekend in a row, it felt off, forced, as if she was making up for something. Then came the weekdays. She was different, cold. Every little thing I did seemed to annoy her. The way I chewed, the way I left my shoes near the door, the way I used too much toothpaste. "Do you have to breathe so loud?" she snapped one night. I stared at her. Breathe? That was a new one. She caught herself, forced a tight smile, and mumbled something about a stressful week. But my gut was already twisting. Something was wrong. It was a Wednesday morning when I found it. Emily had already left for work. I was making the bed when I noticed something wedged between her nightstand and the mattress. I reached down, fingers grazing a small box, a pack of condoms. I stared at it for a long time. We didn't use condoms. I had a vasectomy 7 years ago. Emily was the one who suggested it. "No more surprises," she had joked, laughing as we celebrated our decision with a bottle of wine. Since then, contraception was the last thing on our minds. So why was this here? I ran through the possibilities. Maybe they were old. Maybe they'd just been stuck under the bed for years. But no, the box was new, unopened. My thoughts flickered to our 2 kids, 18 and 20. Could they have left them here? No. They had their own rooms, and frankly, neither of them was stupid enough to hide condoms in their parents' bed. That left one explanation. I sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to see how deep this went. The slip-up 3 days later, the second clue fell into my lap. Emily's co-worker, Lisa, stopped by in the morning to pick her up. Normally, Emily left on her own, but today Lisa had offered to drive her. I invited her in for coffee while my wife finished getting ready. We made small talk. Nothing unusual, until Lisa said something that made my stomach drop. "It's a shame. You weren't there for the presentation last week. It really would have helped." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. Lisa frowned. "You weren't at the office that day, right? I figured you were working from home." I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. Emily had told me she had an important presentation that day. She was stressed about it. She stayed late at the office. She wasn't home until nearly midnight. So where the hell was she? I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just nodded, smiled, and finished my coffee. But my stomach was a knot of ice. That afternoon, I decided to call her. I wasn't planning to accuse her, not over the phone. I just wanted to hear her voice, to see how she reacted if I asked about her day. The phone rang once, twice. Then someone picked up. But it wasn't Emily. It was a man. He didn't say anything. Just silence. Then the line went dead. I sat there, gripping the phone so hard my fingers turned white. That was it. The moment I knew my marriage was over. I didn't know how long it had been going on. I didn't know who he was. But I knew one thing for sure. She was lying to me. And now I had to decide what I was going to do about it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, listening to the soft, steady breathing of my wife beside me, my mind replaying that moment over and over again. The silence on the phone. The way the call was cut off immediately. The fact that a man had answered Emily's phone. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, my chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. She turned in her sleep once, mumbling something incoherent, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. I could have shaken her awake right then and there, demanded answers. But I knew how that would go. She'd deny everything, get defensive, maybe even turn it around. On me, gaslight me, I needed more. If she was lying, she had been doing it for a while. And people who lie for that long, they get comfortable. They slip up. The next morning, I woke up before her and grabbed my laptop. I needed to check something. Our finances. If she was having an affair, there had to be traces. Hotel charges, gifts, maybe even cash withdrawals she couldn't explain. I went through our bank statements carefully, scrolling through the last 6 months of transactions. Nothing. Nothing suspicious. No random charges from hotels or fancy restaurants. No large withdrawals of cash. It was almost too clean, like she had been careful. Too careful. My stomach twisted. If she had been using a separate account, I wouldn't see it here. And something about that thought scared me more than any hotel receipt ever could. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning. I wasn't going to play the role of the clueless husband. If she thought I was blind, I was going to let her think that. I needed to see what she would do when she thought I wasn't watching. So I decided to push her. See how deep this went. I was going to fake my own affair. I don't know where the idea came from, maybe some desperate animalistic instinct to make her feel what I was feeling. Maybe I just wanted to see her reaction, force her to expose herself. Either way, I was going through with it. That evening, I left the house, telling Emily I was meeting an old friend for drinks. She barely reacted, just nodded like she was, relieved I was going. I sat at the bar, nursing a drink, watching the people around me. Then I spotted her, a woman in her late 20s, alone, scrolling through her phone. I didn't want to manipulate someone innocent into my plan, so I approached her with honesty. "Hey, this is gonna sound weird," I said, sliding onto the stool beside her. She looked up, skeptical but curious. "Oh yeah?" I exhaled. "I need your help with something, and I'll pay you $200 for it." Her eyebrow arched. "I'm listening." I told her everything. About my suspicions, my plan, how I needed someone to act like they were interested in me, just enough for my wife to notice, maybe even get a little physical, just for show. The woman laughed, actually laughed. "Jesus, that's dark," I shrugged. "I need to know the truth." She tapped her nails against her glass, thinking. Then she smirked. "All right, let's mess with your wife." An hour later, I called Emily, slurred my words a little, let the background noise filter into the call. "Babe, I think I had too much. Can you come get me?" At first, she hesitated. "Can't you take an Uber?" No. "I think I lost my wallet," I lied. "Please, Em, just this once." Silence. Then a sigh. "Fine. Where are you?" 15 minutes later, she arrived. I made sure she walked in just in time to see the woman I'd hired leaning in, whispering in my ear, laughing, her hand on my thigh. And then, for the final blow, she kissed my cheek. Emily's reaction was not what I expected. She didn't scream, didn't yank me off the stool or throw a fit. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she calmly pulled out her wallet, handed the bartender a $50 bill, and said, "Sorry for the trouble." Then she turned to me. "Let's go." Just like that. No accusations, no anger, nothing. But before we walked out, the woman I hired, clearly enjoying herself, decided to push things further. She called after me, voice sultry and teasing. "Babe, don't go. You promised tonight would be even better than last time." For the first time, Emily's expression changed. A flicker of something, panic, anger, guilt, crossed her face. Her jaw tightened. And then finally I saw what I was looking for. She cared, not because she thought I was cheating, but because she saw herself in me. The drive home was silent. And then, just as we pulled into the driveway, she snapped. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hissed, slamming the car into park. "You think this is funny? You think playing these little games is some kind of joke? I turned to her, my voice calm. I don't know, Emily. You tell me. You've been acting strange for weeks. I find condoms in our bedroom when we don't use them. Your coworker tells me you weren't at work when you said you were, and then a man answers your phone. She paled. There it was, the moment of truth. But instead of denying it, instead of spinning some elaborate lie, she said nothing, just stared at me. You don't even have a good excuse, do you? I said, almost laughing. Jesus Christ. She ran a hand through her hair, exhaling shakily. I don't want to fight right now. I shook my head. That's the problem, Em. You don't want to fight. You don't want to explain. You don't want to do anything. And then, suddenly, she changed. The anger faded. The panic disappeared. And she just relaxed. That scared me more than anything, because at that moment I realized something terrible. She wasn't just cheating. She had been cheating for a long time, so long that she had already processed the guilt, so long that this wasn't an affair. It was her life, and I was just a part of it. A side piece of a bigger picture I had never even noticed. I didn't say another word. I just walked inside, laid down on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. Emily didn't come after me. She didn't try to explain. She just went upstairs, and I knew then that my marriage was already over. I just hadn't accepted it yet. The next morning, I woke up feeling numb. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. There was a strange stillness inside me, like I had stepped out of my own life and was watching everything unfold from a distance. Emily was already in the kitchen when I walked in, sipping coffee like nothing had happened the night before. Like she hadn't been caught. Like she hadn't stopped even trying to lie. "Morning," she said. I sat across from her, studying her face. "Morning." She didn't look guilty, not even nervous. In fact, she looked relieved. And that's when it hit me. She thought I had given up. That I had accepted this. I took a slow breath, my fingers tapping against the table. "I owe you an apology." That got her attention. Her eyes flicked up from her cup, lips pressing into a thin line. "Oh?" "For last night," I said smoothly. "For the bar. It was stupid. I got drunk and acted like an idiot." She exhaled, nodding slowly. "It's fine. You were drunk. It happens." I smiled. "That's the thing, though. I wasn't." Her expression froze. I leaned forward. "I wasn't drunk at all, Em. I wanted to see how you'd react." A flicker of something, anger maybe, flashed in her eyes. "That's a pretty fucked up thing to do." I shrugged. "So is lying to your husband for God knows how long." She didn't even flinch, didn't deny it, just stared at me. And then slowly, she smiled. Not a real smile, not an apology. A quiet, almost pitying curve of her lips. "You seriously think that I would live with you all my life?" she asked softly. Then next words. "Your revolver is not the same as 10 years ago." The words felt like a bullet to the chest. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. "How long, my insatiable?" She sighed like she was tired of the conversation already. "Does it matter?" I exhaled sharply, pushing back my chair. "You know what? You're right. It doesn't." Because at that moment I knew the answer. Long time. Years. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. I could barely focus on work, barely hear anything my coworkers were saying. I was floating through my own life, disconnected, like I had already left, but my body was still here, going through the motions. By the time I got home, Emily was waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, sipping a glass of wine. "We need to talk," she said. I sat down across from her, stretching my arms along the back of the chair, pretending I wasn't already miles away from this conversation. "Go ahead." She took a slow sip, exhaling. "I think we should have an open marriage." I almost laughed. "Are you serious?" She nodded, completely calm. "Yes. I love you, but I also think we've outgrown the idea of monogamy." We could still be together. We could still be a family, just with different expectations. I let that sit for a moment, staring at her like she had grown a second head. Then I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Let me ask you something. If I had never found out, would you have ever told me? She hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. I smiled bitterly. That's what I thought. She sighed, setting down her glass. You're overreacting. I laughed at that. A real, genuine laugh. Then I stood up. Get your things, I said quietly. Her eyebrows lifted. Excuse me? You're leaving, I said simply. You want to sleep with other people? Great. You can do it somewhere else. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I saw her crack. She wasn't expecting this. She thought she had me backed into a corner, that I'd be so desperate to hold on to our life that I'd go along with whatever bullshit arrangement she proposed. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but I didn't care anymore. I just walked upstairs and started packing her things. I didn't want them to hear it from her first, so the next morning I called both our kids, told them we needed to talk. They met me at a nearby coffee shop, their faces already tense. They knew. Before I even said a word, they knew. My daughter was the first to speak. Is this about Mom? I nodded slowly. Yeah. She exhaled sharply, looking away. My son rubbed his hands together, jaw clenched tight. We've known for a while, he admitted. I felt the air leave my lungs. You what? They exchanged a look, then my daughter sighed. Dad, we didn't want to hurt you. We didn't know how to tell you. I stared at them, my mind struggling to process the words. They knew. My own children knew before I did. I swallowed hard. How long? Years, my son muttered. She's been careful, but not that careful. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my hands from shaking. She doesn't care, Dad, my daughter said gently. She's been like this for a long time. I think she just assumed you'd never leave. I nodded slowly, because I had assumed that too. Few days later, she was already packing. No tears, no regret, just quiet efficiency, like she was checking off a list in her head. I stood in the doorway, watching her fold clothes and zip up suitcases, the sounds of the hangers clicking together filling the silence. I can help you find a place, I said finally, my voice hoarse. If you need it, she let out a short laugh, shaking her head. Oh, don't be ridiculous. I frowned. What? She turned to face me, arms crossed, that same smug little smirk on her lips. You really think I didn't plan for this? I stared at her. She tilted her head slightly, studying my face like she was enjoying this. Then she leaned in, just a little voice dropping to something almost playful. I've had a place for months. She smiled wider, zipping up the last suitcase and grabbing her purse. Honestly, I'm surprised it took you this long to figure things out. I let out, a slow breath forcing my hands to stay at my sides. Who would have thought? I muttered. She shrugged. Not everyone is good at keeping secrets. And with that, she turned and walked out the door. I didn't follow. I didn't try to stop her. I just listened to the sound of her suitcase, wheels rolling down the sidewalk, the door of a car opening, then closing. The engine started, and then she was gone. The house was silent. For the first time in years, there was no trace of her. No perfume lingering in the air, no scattered shoes by the door. No sound of her humming absent-mindedly in the next room. I sat down on the couch, rubbing my face, exhaling slowly. And then the thoughts started creeping in. How much more was there? If I had kept digging, if I had asked the right questions sooner, how many other betrayals would I have uncovered? How many more nights had she lied about where she was? How many more years had she been slipping through my fingers while I was too blind to see it? I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest, like 100 unopened doors leading to a truth I would never fully understand. But then, something strange happened. I let it go. I exhaled and leaned back against the couch, closing my I didn't need to know everything. She was gone and I was free.